I was the one who sat beside my stepmother when my dad died. Arranged the funeral. Paid the bills. Then at the reading of the will, she smiled and said, "Your father left you nothing. He said you always resented me." I looked at the lawyer, confused. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I requested a copy. 2 days later, I noticed something wrong in the document headers, and what I found buried in the margins. I was the one holding my father's hand when he died. Not Grace. Not the woman who married him a year after my mom died. Not the woman who moved into our family home with her perfume, her white furniture, and her fake kindness. She was sitting on the other side of the hospital bed, dabbing her eyes with a dry tissue. She always had a flair for fake tears. I was the one who came to the hospital every day. I brought fresh clothes. Paid the parking fees. Talked to the nurses. Held my dad's hand when the pain meds made him mumble nonsense or cry out in his sleep. I stayed with him when the chemo made him too weak to talk. I stayed even when Grace said I didn't have to. I was there when he died. He exhaled slow, then nothing. I knew before the machines confirmed it. His hand went cold in mine. Grace let go of his and stepped out of the room like she was going to grab coffee. She didn't come back for almost an hour. I was the one who arranged everything after. Grace didn't even know where his birth certificate was. I had to dig through the filing cabinet in the basement to find the documents. I picked out the casket. Called the funeral home. Drove all the way across town to pick up his dress blues. He was a Navy vet and wanted to be buried in uniform. Grace wanted something simple. Said it like it was a compliment, but I heard the laziness underneath. I paid for the obituary. Paid for the food after the service. Paid for the flowers. She couldn't find her checkbook. The day we buried him, she wore white. A white coat. A white hat. She looked like she was dressing up for some charity gala, not saying goodbye to her husband. Still, I stayed quiet. Maybe she was grieving in her own way. That's what I told myself. Until the will reading. We met at the law office my dad had used for over 10 years, Becker and Ellis, just outside downtown Kansas City. I'd been there before, years ago, when Dad signed over power of attorney to me for medical decisions. Becker was stiff, professional, not warm but not cruel. He looked uncomfortable the minute I walked in. Grace was already seated. She was smiling. I took a seat. He shuffled papers. Read the will out loud. Everything, house, cars, bank accounts, life insurance, investments, was left to Grace. Then he read my part. To my son I leave nothing. He has always resented my marriage and made his distance clear. I didn't even breathe for a few seconds. I felt like someone had hit me in the gut with a shovel. Grace turned toward me and said without blinking, "I'm sorry, honey. That's what your father wanted." The lawyer closed the file quickly. I asked, "That's it?" He nodded. Didn't meet my eyes. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall for hours. There's no way in hell my dad wrote those words. Yes, things had been rough between us after Mom died. Yes, I was cold to Grace in the beginning. But that was a decade ago. Me and Dad had rebuilt everything. I helped him rebuild the deck last year. He called me for help with taxes, car problems, even cooking. He sent me birthday cards, always wrote, "Love, Dad," in his crooked handwriting. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. And so was I. He would never leave me nothing. And he sure as hell wouldn't say I resented him. That line wasn't his voice. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went back to Becker's office that Monday. Asked for a copy of the will. He said they'd mail it. I said I'd wait. Sat in the lobby for 2 hours until he finally printed and stamped it. I took it home and laid it out on the table. I had another document my dad signed back in April, a power of attorney form. I still had it in my email from when the hospital needed it. I opened both PDFs and looked at them side by side. At first glance, they looked the same. Legal letterhead, standard format. But something felt off. The margins were different. It was small, half an inch maybe. But the paragraphs sat a little lower on the will. And the font looked thinner. Not the same weight. Not the same spacing. Then I looked at the signature. It was shaky. Worse than his usual. It tilted weird. Didn't line up with where the date was written. My gut twisted. I drove to St. Louis the next day to meet with my friend Vanessa. She worked for a high-end law firm and knew this stuff better than I did. I brought both documents. She noticed the differences in minutes. "This will was edited," she said. She pulled up the metadata on the PDF. The will was supposedly signed 4 months ago. But the file had been modified less than 3 weeks before Dad died. I sat there, silent. She ran a basic overlay of the signature from the will and compared it to the one on the power of attorney form. They didn't match. Someone had forged it. Or pressured him into signing something when he was barely conscious. I didn't tell Grace. I didn't call her. Didn't text her. Just let her think I was gone and defeated. Meanwhile, I found a new lawyer, Carol Timmons. Gray hair, sharp voice, didn't take crap from anyone. She'd handled with disputes before and wasn't scared of Becker's office or Grace. She looked at the documents, heard the story, and said, "Let's burn it all down." We filed a challenge in probate court the next morning. Attached the evidence from Vanessa's analysis. The metadata. The mismatched signatures. The text from my dad saying he wanted things split evenly between me and Grace. We subpoenaed the original hard copy will from Becker's office. When it arrived, Carol opened it in front of me. No notary stamp. No witness names. Just a shaky signature and a date. Totally invalid. That's when we knew we had them. Grace got served within the week. I heard from her that night. "You're really doing this?" she asked, voice all sweet and fake. "You're going to take your father's last wishes and turn them into a circus?" I didn't say much. Just told her the signature was fake. She hung up. Fast. I haven't spoken to her since. Court dates got set. Grace lawyered up fast, but the cracks showed. One of her witnesses admitted in a deposition that he didn't even know what he was watching my dad sign. Just showed up for dinner one night and got told to sign something for insurance. Carol found bank activity too, strange withdrawals right before Dad died. Grace transferring money between accounts. Quietly moving assets. But what really made everything click was the insurance policy. My dad's life insurance had listed me as a co-beneficiary for years. Then, 2 weeks before he died, it changed. Grace said he changed it himself. The insurance company logged the change from her computer. Middle of the night. While he was in the ICU. That's when I knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. It didn't stop with the forged will. Once Grace knew I was coming for her, she stopped playing nice. She hired some slick-talking lawyer out of Overland Park who tried to paint me as estranged. Claimed I'd only reconnected with my dad in the last year to get into his will. They submitted fake emails, where I supposedly wrote my dad asking for money. Only problem? They used an old email address I hadn't used since 2015. My dad never emailed me. He hated typing. He called. He texted. I still had the voicemails. We brought in a tech expert who traced the fake emails back to an IP address linked to Grace's cousin's house. That same cousin had witnessed the will signing. It was all coming together. But just when I thought things were finally tipping in my favor, something else hit me like a truck. I got a letter in the mail from the county tax office. Apparently, just days after Dad died, Grace had filed for a transfer on death deed for the house. She claimed he signed it a month before passing. Said it was his final request? I'd never heard of this document before. It wasn't part of the will. It wasn't mentioned in probate. But there it was, signed, notarized, and filed with the county clerk's office. That meant she could sell the house before the case even ended. She was trying to beat the clock. I rushed to the courthouse, got a copy of the deed. You want to guess who the notary was? Some woman named Cynthia Parker. I checked Facebook. Found her profile in 10 minutes. Works at a nail salon. Not a registered notary. Carol and I filed a restraining order on the house that same day. Grace was furious. Called me, screaming this time. "You have no idea what you're doing. You're going to regret this. This was your father's wish. You're just bitter. You always were. He told me that all the time." I stayed calm. Just said, "We'll see what the court says." She hung up. Then came the storage unit. I had almost forgotten about it. My dad rented a storage locker across town to keep old tools, records, and Navy memorabilia. I remembered it only because one of the texts he sent a few months ago mentioned me picking up a cooler from there. I still had the gate code. I went to the unit early one morning and unlocked it. Inside were shelves of neatly stacked boxes. Labeled. Organized. On the top shelf, I found a fireproof folder labeled Wills and Life Plans. Inside? A signed, notarized will. Dated 6 months before the fake one Becker read. It named me and Grace as equal beneficiaries. 50-50th split. It also included a letter to me, in my dad's handwriting. "If anything happens, this version is the one I trust. Do not let anyone change it." Carol took one look and said, "This is the nuke. This will end her." But I didn't want to end it yet. I wanted everything on record. So we waited. At the next hearing, Grace's lawyer argued the existing will was clearly valid, and that I had fabricated my claims because I was bitter about being cut out. I let him finish. Then Carol walked up with the will from the storage unit. Notarized. Signed. Witnessed by 2 Navy friends of my dad, both of whom we had waiting outside in the hall. The judge looked at the documents. Then he looked at Grace. She was pale. Then Carol handed over the tech report showing the metadata tampering on the fake will. The fake notary on the house deed. The insurance login from her cousin's Wi-Fi. The judge ordered an emergency continuance. But it was already over. Grace knew it. She started texting me again. At first, begging. I was scared. He told me he'd change his mind. Then guilt. Your father wouldn't want us fighting like this. I only did what I thought was fair. Then threats. If I go down, I'll take everything with me. You don't know half of it. I didn't respond. I let her sink. Because I wasn't done yet. 3 days after the hearing, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years. It was Sylvia, my dad's old friend from the Navy. She lived down in Tulsa now. Said she heard about what was going on from another mutual friend who saw something on Facebook. Sylvia sounded nervous, but determined. There's something you need to know, she said. I drove down to Tulsa that weekend. We met at a quiet diner off Route 66. She slid a small manila envelope across the table. Inside were photocopies of emails, real ones. Not fakes. These were between my dad and his bank's estate planning officer. One stuck out right away. It was dated 9 months before his death. I've decided to split things between my son and Grace equally. He's stepped up over the last few years. Grace, well, I don't always understand her, but she's been here too. I want it fair. That matched the will from the storage unit. The one we found with the letter to me. Then came the kicker. Another email, dated 4 months before he died. The subject line. Requesting new draft. Grace is pushing me to leave everything to her. Says it's simpler that way. But I don't feel right about it. Keep the previous version active. I'm not ready to change anything. My hands were shaking. He never changed it. He refused. And yet, somehow Will showed up in Becker's office 2 months later saying exactly what Grace wanted. Sylvia said my dad called her one night upset. Said Grace had been pressuring him, bringing up money constantly, even while he was hooked to IVs. She claimed she was just trying to protect his wishes. But he felt worn down. Tired. Something wasn't right with her, Sylvia said. I could hear it in his voice. Like he didn't trust her anymore. A few days later, Grace's cousin, the same one who signed as a witness to the will, was caught trying to delete old messages and files from his laptop. Big mistake. His ex-girlfriend turned the laptop over to the court after they had a messy breakup. She said he was acting shady and panicked once court got involved. On the hard drive? A draft version of the forged will, with comments in the margins. I'm not kidding. They actually left comments like, remove son's name, Grace said he's out. Use same language Becker used in '08 version so it looks familiar. That was it. Becker was roped in now. We sent a formal complaint to the state bar. Attached everything. The draft. The forged signature. The altered metadata. The conflict of interest. The lack of proper notarization. He tried to play dumb at first. Then he went quiet. Rumor was he was negotiating a deal to give up his license in exchange for avoiding criminal charges. Grace? She started spiraling. She put the house up for sale, even though we had a freeze on it. She tried to empty a joint savings account that was supposed to stay locked under court order. She even sent a letter to my lawyer, pretending to be remorseful and offering to settle. Quietly. Carol didn't even respond. Instead, we filed a motion for full estate control, citing fraud, financial abuse, and attempted theft. But the thing that finally broke her? A nurse from the hospital came forward. Her name was Jessica. Young, nervous. She'd seen my dad in those last few weeks. She remembered how Grace kept showing up with paperwork she wanted my dad to sign. Jessica said she saw him refuse more than once. He was too tired. He couldn't read. He'd say not now, and she'd say, but Rick, it's just a signature, come on. She got mad at him a couple times. One time she slammed her purse on the table and stormed out. That went into the affidavit. It confirmed everything I suspected. Grace had been trying for weeks to push him into signing something he didn't understand. When he wouldn't, she made it happen anyway. The forged will wasn't sloppy. It was desperate. And now? It was all unraveling. But I still hadn't made my move. The real move. Because hidden under all the estate chaos, there was something else Grace didn't know about. My dad kept a private account. I only found out about it because of a note scribbled in one of his old Navy journals from the storage unit. It said, "Extra savings, credit union ACCT ending in 5821. If needed, give to my name." Grace doesn't know. When I called the credit union, they confirmed it. The account was still active. And it held $178,000. My father's emergency fund. Tucked away where she couldn't reach it. Not tied to the estate. Not in her name. Just waiting. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Because I had one more thing to do. I waited until the final court hearing to use what I had. The courtroom was quiet. Just a handful of people, Grace, her new lawyer, her third one, my lawyer Carol, the probate judge, a clerk, and me. Grace looked thinner. Not physically. She still wore that fake expensive perfume and those shiny white heels, but her confidence was gone. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun. No makeup. She barely looked at me. The judge went through the usual motions. Asked for final statements. Grace's lawyer tried to argue the forged will was signed under confusing circumstances, but should still be respected, because it reflected verbal intentions. Then Carol stood up and laid it all out. The real will. The storage unit discovery. The metadata. The fake witness testimony. The fraudulent notary. The nurse's affidavit. The hidden emails Sylvia gave us. And the cousin's laptop, with the tracked edits that literally said, "Remove son's name." The judge didn't interrupt once. He just sat there, frowning, flipping through papers. Finally, I stood. I told the court what really happened. How I took care of my dad when he was sick. How I held his hand when he died. How Grace didn't even cry. How she smiled when the will was read. How I didn't get angry right away, but something felt wrong. And how I followed that feeling all the way down to the truth. Then I dropped the final piece. The credit union account. I submitted it as evidence, not to keep it, but to prove one thing: my father never stopped trusting me. He made sure I had something, even if the rest got stolen. That account was proof. I looked straight at Grace when I said that. She didn't look away. She didn't cry. But her hands clenched in her lap like she wanted to scream. The judge's ruling came a week later. He voided the forged will completely. Declared the original 50-50 will from the storage unit as the legally binding version. But it didn't end there. He reported Grace to the DA's office for suspected elder financial abuse and fraud. They opened a formal criminal investigation. Here's how it all shook out: Grace lost everything. She was charged with multiple counts of forgery, fraud, and obstruction. She took a plea deal to avoid prison, but the terms were brutal. 3 years of house arrest, 5 years probation, court-ordered restitution of $91,000, lifetime ban from acting as a trustee or executor in the state of Missouri Community Service, cleaning parks on weekends. Her name is now permanently tied to elder abuse cases in the state database. The house was sold. I got my half. The insurance company revoked her payout and gave the remaining balance to me, once we showed them proof of tampering. Becker? The lawyer? He resigned before they disbarred him. But the Missouri bar still made a public statement. He lost all his clients, got sued for malpractice, and moved out of state. Last I heard, he's doing tax paperwork in Arizona for a chain of RV dealerships. Grace's cousin? He was charged with perjury and tampering. 2 years probation and a record that'll follow him forever. Me? I didn't keep it all. I donated $30,000 to the hospital where Dad spent his final days, St. Joseph's Oncology Ward. I gave another $10,000 to a legal aid group that helps seniors protect their estates. But I kept the rest. Bought a house just outside of Columbia. Quiet neighborhood. Big trees. Room for a dog. And that secret credit union account? I left it untouched until the day the court closed the case. Then I used it to start a scholarship fund in my dad's name, for veterans going back to school. It's called the Richard Marlton Honor Fund. I visit the office once a month, just to check in. Every time I walk past the plaque, I remember the way he smiled when he caught his first fish with me, the way he whistled Sinatra when he cooked eggs, the way he held my shoulder the day I graduated. He never left me with nothing. Grace just tried to make it look that way. She tried to rewrite the ending. But I took it back. And now every single person who lied, who stole, who smiled at the funeral and thought they got away with it, they all know the truth. They didn't win. They never even came close.